Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome to Pathways today Miss Masturah Alatas. Masura teaches English in Italy at the moment, and she's also the daughter, very dedicated daughter, in fact, of the late Syed Hussein Alatas. Thank you for coming on to this podcast, Masura.
Good afternoon, Victor. Thank you for inviting me and hosting me on your podcast channel. Thank you.
Amazing. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here. Would you share a little bit about, well, what brought you to Italy?
I was a student at Rutgers University in the US, and I met my husband there, and he's Italian. And then I came back to Malaysia after I graduated to work as a journalist, as I said, and my husband went back to Italy. And as a journalist, I decided to go to Italy as a correspondent. That's how I went to Italy, and we met up again, and I joined my husband there. I was with a news agency for a while in Italy, and then I started looking for a teaching job, and I found one in this town called Masura, and which happens to be the birthplace of Matteo Ricci, the first Jesuit missionary to go to China.
Wow.
Yeah, he brought clocks and maps. He made a map for the Chinese of the world. Yeah, it's an interesting story. Maybe next time we can talk about Matteo Ricci. I teach in a small university. It's called the University of Masura. And there's a language institute there which teaches foreign languages. I teach English, and they teach Chinese, Arabic, French, Spanish, German, so the different foreign languages.
I see.
And I have international students, Italian students.
Do you then speak Italian now?
Yes, I'm fluent. I also write in Italian.
You write in Italian?
Yes.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, no, this is not my first book, and it's not even my first publication. But
is there going to be a translation of the life in the writing into Italian at some point?
Who knows? Let's see. There's going to be a translation in Malay first. But
oh, that's so interesting.
I publish stories and essays in Italian as well. So
I see.
Yeah.
So you're saying that this book is available in English, but it's not available in Malay?
Not yet. And actually, as you know, the myth of the lazy native, it took many years before the Bahasa translation came out. And the first Bahasa translation was Indonesian. So, and then it came into Bahasa Malaysia. So yeah, it's always like that with translation.
And that's so fascinating, because even when you use, for example, software, like for example ChatGPT, which is trained on gigantic language corpuses throughout the internet, right? And then you ask it to speak in Malay, it will tend to give you Indonesian.
Well, Indonesia is the largest Bahasa speaking nation in the region in terms of number of speakers. So I suppose, and Bahasa Malaysia is considered to be a kind of offshoot of, so maybe that's the reason.
Fascinating. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that a hero, a Malaysian academic, would be essentially writing in English, because I guess the classical idea really of, well, what must be essentially like a hero from Malaysia might be somebody who would be conversing, speaking, writing, or articulating themselves entirely or primarily really in Malay.
Well, yeah, my father was a bilingual writer. He wrote in both Bahasa and English. And as you know, one chapter in the myth of the lazy natives was a sort of a development on Siapa Yang Salah and Biarkan Buta and all these different Malay essays as well. He was truly bilingual, as are many Malaysians. So it's not an excuse. If one Malaysian is writing in Tamil or in one of the Chinese languages, and another in Bahasa and another in English. I mean, if we all know each other, I mean, I read in Malay. We should be reading each other, and if we can't in each other's languages, then have translators. The role of the translator is very important.
Absolutely.
So I focused on my father's English writings, but with an invitation for somebody else to focus on his Malay writings. Right? I mean, they can check the archives. Why not? Right?
I see. Cool. Thank you for that. Masura, your father is a legendary academic. I recall reading The Myth of the Lazy Native a while ago while I was interviewing your sister, Munira. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Syed Hussein Alatas?
Well, the first thing I think about, obviously, is that he was my father. But I'm also aware that he was a public figure and both an intellectual and a former politician as well. So, I think of my father in all these multifaceted dimensions, both as a father, family man, and also as a public figure, public intellectual, and the author of one of the seminal post-colonial texts, The Myth of the Lazy Native, and I am I'm his biographer, and I wrote the book you just held up, The Life in the Writing.
Wow. What an experience it must have been like. I mean, your father held so many different hats upon his head at different points of his life. He was the founder of Gerakan, if I'm not wrong. Then, of course, he was the author of The Myth of the Lazy Native. And, well, he was, of course, for a brief while, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Malaya. That was an aspect of his career. But what is it that inspired you to become your father's biographer?
Okay, first of all, my father was not the only founder of Gerakan. There were others like Wang Gungwu, V. David, and so on. It was the first opposition multi-ethnic party in Malaysia. So he became the party's chairman. What inspired me to write his biography? Well, I'm a writer myself. I started off as a journalist, and quite a common tradition to have children write about their parents. I mean, you have many biographers. Freud's daughter writing about Freud. You have Nigel Nicolson writing about Harold Nicolson. It's quite a long tradition of children writing about their parents. We have the archive, we have the information, we have the close-up knowledge, we have the personal knowledge. And so, as a journalist, I was interested in telling a factual story of a man that Malaysians know only in parts. They might know him as the one of the founders of Gerakan. They might know him as the author of The Myth of the Lazy Native. They might know him as a former... But not everybody knows him as a complete person. Obviously, no biography can capture the subject in its total completeness, which is why I chose the angle, his writing life. I chose only to focus on his writing life, and through that, it opens up into their trajectories. It opens up into all the other aspects of his life. You'll find a little bit about his university life, his political life, anything to do with writing. I mean, when you're a politician, you have to write speeches, right? And when you are a university administrator, you have to write reports or whatever. You have to give interviews to the media. And when you are obviously, when you're an academic, you have to write books. And when you're a father, you have to write letters. Or a son, you have to write letters. So I chose to focus on essentially his writing life.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for that. I'm curious, incidentally, you have lots of different samples of Syed Hussein's writing in here. And of course, some pieces of writing, like for example, Intellectuals in Developing Societies and also The Myth of the Lazy Native, they are more, shall we say, well-known in our society. But of all of your father's writings, what stands out to you as your personal favorite? Like, what is the piece of writing that you like the most from your father?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never really thought about it because I like so many things from so many different, his different works. So I think I can't take a single piece. Obviously, The Myth of the Lazy Native is a classic, and obviously I studied that, most closely. But, there are even parts in Modernization and Social Change about the Weber thesis, which I like, and sections about Singapore, which I like. And of course, as a biographer, I like Raffles, Schemer and Reformer. It's a small book. It is a biographical study of the founder, somebody who's known as the founder of Singapore. I mean, it really shows us, how he thought about the the different ethnic communities in Singapore. It shows his prejudice. Raffles, not my father. I don't have a personal favorite, but I like. I mean, there's strings of articles. I don't know how to choose one. But that is the point of my book. I try to bring together all his different voices. I liked his voice. I liked his writing voice, and his real voice, of course. But I liked the way he sounded in writing. That's my personal favorite, his voice.
Wonderful. Well, when you think about, well, your father's voice and the way that it reached the people right there. Now, we've just concluded, in fact, a session in which your brother was present as well. You were alongside Farish Noor thinking about a lot of like those ideas of like decolonization. Well, when you think of your father and the way that his voice may have reached our generation, whether in the present or in the past, what do you feel were some of the most impactful ways in which that voice did reach the people?
Okay, good question. You see, the thing about voice is that not everybody will like it. And, contradicting what I said earlier, I too may relate differently to his different voices. Sometimes he can be very convincing, sometimes he can be very hard-hitting and critical, sometimes very urgent, forceful. I mean, there is a letter in my book, him writing to the press after the May 13th riots. He was calling for an end to censorship. I mean, he wanted to know what exactly was going on. Tell the people what was going on. Give us the facts. I mean, you need to be in a position of authority to do that. And of course, as chairman of Gerakan, who was directly implicated in the riots in the sense that connected to the victory parade and so on. I mean, you know the whole story. You need to have that kind of forceful voice. So today, not everybody will like that. So the impact is varied, and not everybody can have that style.
I guess a lot of people, they tend to be more, shall we say, deferential, we can say. Maybe more...
Yes. You would say feudal, maybe, sometimes, if it's like you've got to count. No, but sure. And of course, in the myth of the lazy native too, you have to, you have to have such a strong grasp of your own argument in order to get it across in your prose. And I mean, this is the art of rhetoric, right? So the myth of the lazy native too, you can really hear his decolonialist call and voice in that. Why have we bought into the idea that Malays are lazy? And then he tries to get us out of that way of thinking by, showing us how the myth of the lazy native was constructed. And of course, there are parts in there too, where he says, also the Chinese were considered to be lazy, but of course, in some situations, I mean, anybody who works, if your boss wants you to work harder, and if you're not, well, of course they're going to say, oh, so lazy. So it's not just something peculiar to the natives, right? And yes, so it's a portrait of laziness, but people today think it's just about Malays being lazy, and actually not. It's not. It's about the
human tendencies.
Yes, but it's a study on how laziness is used to exploit people. The idea of laziness, that you construct somebody as lazy so that you can justify your exploitation of them. I don't know how closely people are reading the book.
I see. Are there parts of this book that you particularly favor, incidentally?
Favor, again, no, because there are chapters on the Philippines, on Java, on Indonesia, Malaysia. But if you want to talk about, in particular, the Malaysian chapters, I suppose they are most relevant to Malaysia, to our context. I mean, revolusi mental, we are still talking about, the mental revolution today.
Tan Sri Sanu Abdul Rahman, right?
Yes.
Right.
And we are still talking about the Malay dilemma today.
Uh-huh.
So after almost 50 years, some of the problems that are raised in this book have
Right.
not directly been addressed.
I see.
Even though, of course, we have a larger entrepreneurial class of Malays, and not just in Malaysia, but also in the Philippines and elsewhere. And of course, we have seen the effects of the NEP. We have more concrete data to analyze the myth of the lazy native after 50 years. So people say, well, are Malays still lazy? You are borrowing this lazy native trope as an excuse to show why maybe after decades of aid and NEP, you're still not satisfied with the results.
Right.
If you're still not satisfied with the results, then you're going to keep saying, oh, they must be lazy, they're not working hard enough.
Right.
And don't conflate laziness with being spoiled. If the richer classes don't want to do certain jobs, that has nothing to do with being lazy.
That
has to do more with being spoiled.
Right. I remember a section actually from your father's book where he was talking about how, for example, the way that, the West or the colonialists, they tend to view time is like very different, in that perhaps they may essentially try to like compartmentalize time. They have this very notion of like lateness, this idea that maybe it is wrong, for example, for a wedding or some sort of like social gathering to go on for like an indefinite period of time right there. But then your father pointed out that that was a matter of culture along the way. I found that to be interesting to think about. And this then makes me wonder a little bit right here. What do you feel are some of the lessons maybe that the myth of the lazy native has to offer, or even the rest of your father's legacy? Like, what does it have to offer to Malaysia in its current state of development?
Well, that section about time, I believe he was saying that you cannot, something about you cannot accuse natives of not being punctual or Malays of not being punctual when they do have a sense of punctuality when it comes to prayer times. I believe that was the example. So it was about not making generalizations and judgments if you don't really understand the culture. I mean, every culture has a sense of time, a sense of punctuality, and so he was being corrected. He was correcting a slant view of if you don't understand the culture, then you can't judge them. You can't make generalizations. In terms of today, I think the myth of the lazy native is a historical study. I'm not seeing the sense in the continuity of talking today about laziness through its historical categorization. If you're going to look at the state of Malaysia today, factor in lots of other categories, lots of other paradigms, education, corruption, the way things are in reality, economy. I mean, if you keep going back to anthropological excuses for the state of things, you're not really going to go to the core of the problem. But then when we are talking about ethnic relations, racism, NEP, economic development, education, the Orang Asli, all the big problems of Malaysia, try to interpret them and understand them through different categories of analysis. You can understand them through feudalism, through religion, through corruption, through so many different ways of going into the problem.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for that. When you think about maybe like a top 5 maybe of like things that maybe the world should know about Syed Hussein Alatas, but that the world does not know. So like, what do you think comes to mind? What are some things that, you think that the world should know about Syed Hussein Alatas that they don't currently know?
He didn't write with a computer. and he's never used internet. He's never
used
Googled.
internet.
Yes,
Not even once.
no, he's never Googled.
Wow.
He's never Googled anything on his own. But he likes the idea that somebody else might do it for him. Okay, but he's never Googled. He's never written anything on his own.
I see.
On a computer. So I was trying to tell him about Google. I was showing how. Then he'll say, "Find this for me. Find that for me." I think Malaysians may not know that he was, in some sense, a victim of his own, if one can use own in Malaysia, people. Okay, he was often marginalized, even receiving some racial epithets. There's a reference in my in my book about somebody referring to him as the kambing berjanggut, the man, the goat with the beard, because he had a full beard. Sometimes he's referred to as Melayu palsu, for not a real Malay, fake Malay. People don't really may not know this. Of course, he was accepted by a large chunk of, but also, a large chunk did not, he was largely ignored as well, which is his own phrase. So, there's this kind of marginalized, on the one hand, he's internationally known, and, everybody from all backgrounds are writing about him, whether American, Australian, Indian, Palestinian. I mean, you've got but in Malaysia, it's slightly different perception.
It's kind of like you can never be a hero in your own home. Like
there was something, not that he has to be a hero, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's quite different in Italy, where their intellectuals are received differently. Okay, of course, at some point, everybody runs the risk of being forgotten. All right, we know that everywhere in the world. But this is kind of being forgotten even before you have passed. Or it's like being ignored when everybody is trying to make you remember. So it's a different case in Malaysia.
Do you feel that maybe, Malaysia just lacked really the culture of appreciating intellectuals that maybe Syed Hussein should have deserved at that point in time?
Well, no, Malaysia has its good intellectuals. I mean, as we saw from this morning, and of course, I don't know. It's a combination of maybe not, maybe a little bit of, envy is the wrong word. I don't know, or maybe he's not really saying what they want him to say. It's a combination. It's a combination of things. But not to worry. I mean, he was perfectly fine about them. In my book, there's a quote where he famously says, "I have no public office. I'm not, a member of any particular big club, or I'm not invited to sit on any committee or whatever. But I'm just quietly writing my things and doing my work." He never sat on any government committees. He was never in any big decision-making role. I mean, towards the end, 10, 15 years. So,
I see.
So I think Malaysians don't know this. They see him as part of an elite family, and public figure, and he looks like Fidel Castro, so they see, see him. Yes, but in actual fact, he's not really part of any big...
I see.
So...
Right. But in the popular imagination, I guess, people have this idea, because he did used to appear in the newspapers quite a fair bit.
Yeah.
Are there some ways that you feel that maybe Syed Hussein has already influenced Malaysian society or the world at large through his body of thinking and the literature that he's produced throughout his life?
Well, he always joked that he was a useless sociologist, and that he was superfluous and useless, meaning that he sometimes felt that he was just talking to avoid, and people were paying lip service. And if you think of corruption, you hear in the media, we're against corruption, and I mean, that's kind of paying lip service. You should see it in the results, and not hear politicians talk against corruption, but you should see it in daily life. That there is, that there is less. I mean, there are cities in Southeast Asia. There are neighboring city. I won't say it, but I'm sure you know who I mean. where there is a very, very little corruption, and you can see it in the city, the way the city functions, its efficiency, its education system, its so he would say that the impact is it may not be seen in concrete terms, but as I said, his works will remain. And around the world, I mean, corruption is something that affects the rest of the world, and also some of the things will have some kind of impact depending on who is going to read it. Okay. I mean, even today, I mean, everybody is there's a revival of interest in Edward Said, the Palestinian, the late American Palestinian scholar, because of the situation in Gaza. But I mean, it takes an event like that to sort of revive an interest in the writings and in the thinking. So, who knows? Let's see where it goes. The other 2 or 3 things that Malaysians might not know was that he founded the Malay Studies department in Singapore.
In the US.
Yes, today known as the National University of Singapore. And that the Malay Studies department had a very cosmopolitan character. It had people like, my father, and Yusuf Talib, and Tan Siong Chi, Tan Ching Kwang, Ya Liok Fan. I mean, these are all Chinese names, as you can tell, but they were in Malay Studies. So it was a different time, in the 60s and in the 70s. I mean, even Lee Kuan Yew spoke Malay.
Very well, in fact.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Malay Studies was about studying the region, and it was about studying the different communities of the region, which of course includes the Chinese and the Indians, and we had Indian faculty as well in Malay Studies.
I see. That sounds very inclusive. Like, it's a lot.
Today we use the term inclusive, but I'm saying cosmopolitan in the sense that it wasn't an effort to say let's like the token. Let's have one Chinese person, because it's, or let's have one Indian. It just came about. I mean, I don't know whether he put the team together. And the other thing is that none of us have seen him in real life without a beard. That's something Malaysians will not know. No, none of us. Not my mother. Not the children.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I mean, your mother and your father met in the course of a whirlwind courtship, right?
Yes.
Like during that period of time. I think that your sister wrote about that right there.
Right, yes.
So like his entire life, like he had never been like clean shaven.
Well, as a student, he was. In fact,
there are some photos.
Don't show the picture. If people want to know what if people want to know what he looked like without a beard, they can always have a look in the book. But yeah, when my mother met him, he already had a beard.
I see.
And none of us, and he never shaved it. As far as I know, he never shaved it. Usually, when you have such a full beard, you're not going to take it off and then start again. So neither of us, none of the children have ever seen it. Neither my mother, no. Maybe, of course, his own family when he was a child. I mean, his own brothers, and of course they would have seen it because they grew up with him. But the beard phase begins, and when we were born, it begins with my mother, and after that, none of us have ever seen it.
Wow. Like
I think most Malaysians haven't either.
Yeah, unless you were to like take a picture of him and then like Photoshop it to get rid of the entire beard. One thing that we do see is that Syed Hussein was a person who is known, right, for challenging conventional stereotypes. The myth of the lazy native is an example of this quite clearly. But he was known broadly for his stance against what we can say is the intellectual imperialism, really, of like the West. What did you see about the way that he exposed himself to different influences that might have made him think in this way?
Well, let's consider the generation he comes from, and a lot of intellectuals born during that period. They lived through the war, they lived through colonialism, actual colonialism, and they also lived through the independence movements, and they saw the 3 phases: colonialism, war, independence. So I think when you actually have these experiences, you are going to be critical of your oppressors, of your colonizers. And then moving as a student from Indonesia, my father was born in Indonesia, from Indonesia to the Netherlands, I think you are sensitive to how your former colonial masters are going to treat you and consider you. But at the same time, in a place like University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, you are surrounded by a very stimulating environment. You have other young students from the colonial and post-colonial world around you, from Africa, from Europe, from the Americas, from South Latin America as well. So you are in that environment where people have shared concerns for their countries, and at the same time they are in the European center. So it was a very stimulating environment for him. And of course it's going to help him formulate his own ideas on Malaysia. So he very early came up with the idea of, why are people considering natives lazy? Let me write a book about it. It was published in 1977.
Right.
So I was
By
only 10 years
Katz,
old.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So I was
after that
only
long letter exchange.
That's right, that's right. I was only 10 years old when it was published, but the groundwork for the book was begun before I was born, 1964, 65, and then, and of course he continued working on it after I was born, but I was a child. So there's a scene in my book about him, seeing him in the final stages in 1977. I was 10 years old and he was, maybe not 1970s, maybe 1975 or 76 when he was working on the final stages. And that I have memory of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I'd like to move into a part that may be something remembered as, well, a painful period also for your father, but hopefully it can also be maybe instructive or valuable in some sense. I'd like to understand how your father was as perhaps an administrator. There was a time when he was the vice chancellor of the University of Malaya, but then in merely 3 years, he had essentially left from his position. What was your father like as an administrator, and what do you feel were some of the challenges that he was facing when he was at UN?
Okay. All right. Well, you see, during those years, I was a university student abroad. So I wasn't actually present to witness the sort of entry and departure from university, his departure from his role as vice chancellor. But of course, as a journalist, I looked and I studied the press reports, and of course I heard stories from him, so I know about it from him. But to answer this question, what he was like as a university administrator, just look at the facts. They tried to knock him down on corruption, and then there was a brief investigation. But, he said, a patient who is healthy should not be afraid of a medical checkup. That's what he said. So, come check. You're not going to find anything on me, and they didn't. He tried to be fair and meritocratic as a university administrator, about promotions, about hiring, about and that got him into trouble to some extent. I'm not going into detail, of the stories. I believe that other people should tell their own stories, because you also want to know the story of those on the inside. You should ask this question to people who were actually in the university at the time. What was your VC, your vice chancellor at the time as an administrator? How did you feel? And you will hear all kinds of different answers.
Wow.
Some positive, some negative. In the interest of objectivity, they should be the ones also to tell the story. And of course, our current Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, was Education Minister at the time, and our Prime Minister at the time was Dr. Mahathir Mohamad at the time. So it would be quite interesting to ask them what he was like as a university administrator. As a daughter, can you make the switch from scholar and writer, intellectual to university administrator? It's kind of a difficult switch to make. Maybe you're either one thing and not the other. He tried, and didn't last long. So maybe it wasn't maybe it wasn't meant for him. One can say the same thing about politics. Maybe politics was not meant for him. It's...
To each their own fate, as it were.
Yes, we all do what we know best and do best. He was a university teacher. That's another question. What was he like as university teacher? Ask his former students. And he was a university teacher, he was a scholar, he was a reader, and he was a writer. Those are the things he did for the longest phase in his life. As I said, as an administrator, he tried to be fair, very meritocratic, and innovative. Today they use the word. He tried to change the system, shake things up a bit. Maybe he was a little bit naive. And remember, he was coming back from Singapore, so the reaction was
the culture is different.
Somebody from the culture is different, and somebody from the outside coming in, even though he's Malaysian, right? So there's this feeling of, he doesn't really understand the way we do things around here. So.
Well, as we move to the final phase of this interview, I'd like to understand, Syed Hussein as, a father in some sense. Like, when you think really about the way that Syed Hussein, your father, has influenced you personally, what would you say are some things that, you can attribute to his influence?
I'm actually the only sort of non-academic, in the sense that I'm not a research academic in the family. My brother and sister are. I'm a language teacher, and I also became a journalist. I'm the only writer in the family. I write fiction, I published this biography. So we are all different. But all of us, what did I learn most from him? I suppose the idea that anything you do, you should do it the best you can. And that choosing the paths we chose, he was encouraging about everything. If I had chosen to become, go into the sciences or do something or study chemistry or whatever, he would have been very encouraging about that. Or if I had chosen to work in the private sector as well, he would have been encouraging about anything we chose. How some parents say, don't become a writer, there's no money in that, you're not going to, or don't become a teacher, right? But no, he was just very encouraging about everything we chose. So I think it's that when you see in your parent that they have passion for the things they do, and that passion is for culture, you teach your child how to find pleasure and passion and happiness in culture. I think that's a very valuable thing that he passed to us. And also the idea of whatever you do, do it the best you can, and be the first, not in the first of winning, winning the race, but ask yourself if anybody else has done it. And if you think nobody else has done it, even if it's an illusion, right? I'm sure hundreds of people have done it, but you think nobody else has done it. It gives you that spur, that motivation, because you say, oh wow, okay, I'm the only one doing this, and then you do research to find out whether that's really the case. So it opens up new angles. I think these two things really left a lasting impact on me.
Wonderful. My last question then for today. When you think about Syed Hussein's legacy and you think about the Malaysia in which he had lived for such a long time right here, and also the world that had, held him in esteem, even if perhaps Malaysia was not really able to appreciate him in the best way that it could at that time right here. What do you hope that viewers or the world will take away from Syed Hussein's legacy that they perhaps aren't really taking away at this point in time?
Yeah, I suppose these things can't be forced. Okay, I said earlier something about everybody, runs the risk of being forgotten. The thing about writing books is that they are there, they're permanent. They outlive you to a certain extent. So I really can't predict whether people are going to become more interested or it's going to stay the same. His international reputation is already consolidated, even if in a small way, in a small circle. His Malaysian reputation, well, some people will be interested, others will not be. So I think it's really open. It's a surprise. Let's see what's going to happen, where the legacy. And I think we shouldn't really be conscious about it. Oh, this is Alatas, this is Alatas, this is the legacy. Let's see it in the way Malaysia is going to develop. Let's work backwards, deductively, right? If we see something that reminds us that, oh, Alatas was saying this, or he dreamt of this, he had this dream or vision for Malaysia 50 years ago, then that's where the legacy is.
I see.
Right? We can't really force it, and we can't really predict it, but we might learn how to recognize it. And to do that, you have to know the works well.
I see.
Okay? Let's see how Malaysia is going to develop. Let's see how Malaysians are going to feel collectively as Malaysians, whether it's going to go back to that cosmopolitan idea of, of Malay Studies or Gerakan or whatever. Let's see whether we're going to break down the, ethnic barriers. Let's see whether, we are going to produce a very rich literature and cinema collectively, not just one or two things here and there. So let's see, and that's where the legacy is.
Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Masura Alatas, thank you so much, Masura.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you
so much. And buy this book. All right. Okay. Thank you.